Well, hello there. My name is Julie Hirschberg. I am the owner and founder of Reactive Physical Therapy and Wellness, and I have taken a little hiatus from jumping on here for a live video. So this is my first after, gosh, maybe 3 weeks. And I missed several weeks of my normal live videos, which are one of my favorite things to do to interact with you all and our community. And um, it's been quite a sequence of events. First, I was missing because my mom was in the hospital and she was in inpatient rehab and she was getting better. And I was helping her get home, which was super exciting. Um, and then things took a turn for the worse and we lost my mom. Um, and I have not been able to hop on a live video. And honestly, I'm not sure how well I'm going to do this today. So thanks for bearing with me. Um, I have just very suddenly and unexpectedly, unexplainably, really, had a death in our family and now experiencing a lot of grief. As I mentioned, I do really love this community, and I have heard from so many people reaching out with support that I felt it was really worthwhile to give this a try. So, if this is the first time that you are joining us live or watching one of our educational videos, they're not normally like this. This one's coming from a lot of personal experience for sure. But what I typically do every week is join here and share with you what we're learning, what we're doing at Reactive. And a lot of that comes from personal experience, what we are doing with our patients, what we're learning together. And this is no different. This is just coming from a lot of my experience. So, while we might, today we're going to talk about grief and how it shows up in the brain and the body. And we don't talk about grief a lot. We do, though, talk a lot about this interface of the brain, the mind, the emotional world, and the body, how they affect one another, how they interact. And this is so true in grief. Um, I've certainly experienced grief before. Many of you are grieving right now. I hadn't experienced it on this magnitude, for sure. And the pain and the body symptoms that I have felt and still feel really it interested me. It interested me to understand what is happening here. Um, one of the things I got from my mom is a curiosity, is this love of learning and research and diving in really deep and understanding things. And so this is one of those things that I share literally every week with you is this kind of skill and gift I got from my mom is that curiosity. And this has been one of the ways that I've been working through my own grief, to be honest, is to process it, be with it, research it, and then share it with you. So that's what I want to do today. And we're going to do that in a couple of different ways. So, first, I want to share with you kind of um, how I've got it started, kind of diving in, researching this. And it's through reading, of course, because I love reading, another gift I got from my mom. And it started with a journal that I had actually given to some other friends, colleagues who experienced really heavy grief this year. I had to buy it for myself, and it's called How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed. And it is a grief journal. The author is Megan Devine. She's a psychotherapist. And it is a journal, kind of a journal form of her book, which is called It's Okay That You're Not Okay, Meeting Grief and Loss in a Culture That Doesn't Understand. Um, so I am like doubling down on this. I am listening to the Audible. I am doing the journal. And one of the things that she says for this book, she says, if your life has exploded into a million little bits, you don't need platitudes, you don't need cheerleading, you don't need to be told this all happened for a reason. Some things cannot be fixed, they can only be carried. And gosh, I love that. I love that so much. She also has a really great little video about this. It's an animated video. I put together a bunch of resources, by the way, research, these books, the video. They're all coming in the newsletter today because I thought these were really important to share for you. So let's talk about first doing this journal. So I highly recommend this for all people. If you're grieving or not, I think there's so many lessons to be learned from here. And one of the first parts of the journal is actually on the body and mind, and it reads, grief is a full body experience. And then it gives a space. It says, use the space below to write about the way that grief has affected you physically. So you think about the prompt kind of, grief lives in my body. This immediately got me thinking because I was experiencing it in my body. So you can see my lovely drawing here. You can see how it was affecting me in my body. I knew exactly what I had been noticing. And this was, a big part in thanks to working with a psychotherapist for the last 7 years to be aware of how I might be feeling some things in my body. But I had, if you look at my picture here, I had some pain and tightness. It tends to be on my left-hand side. It was difficult to move my hands. I felt weak and slow in my legs. I had numbness, I had pain, I had tingling. Maybe you've experienced all these things before. I've experienced these before, but they were definitely coming on in this intense emotional experience. So then in her book, It's Okay That You're Not Okay, again, highly recommend this for all healthcare providers because I feel like many of the people that we are working with are grieving in some way. In chapter 9 of this book, this is the book, by the way. It's okay to not be okay. She says, the title is like, what happened to my mind and dealing with grief's physical side effects. And she discusses several areas where grief can show up in the body. And she says that studies on neurobiology show that losing someone close to us changes our biochemistry. And this is absolutely true. There are actual physical reasons for experiencing some of those body symptoms, the insomnia, the exhaustion that I've been feeling, the racing heart. So she said this, and of course, I got more curious. What are those studies? What do people feel in their body with grief, and why? What is going on in that crazy brain of ours? So I had to look in the literature, and I found some really interesting things, and I'm just going to go pretty quickly here. This is not an inclusive lit review by any means, but I just wanted to share some of the things that I found in the literature. And so what we'll do is just talk briefly what it might look like symptoms wise, what does some of the research show us that's happening in the brain, and then what are some ideas that the literature also shows us for processing and helping people in this grief. So, um, the first article that I want to talk about, it's called Everywhere and Nowhere, Grief in Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Pediatric Clinical Populations. Now, I was drawn particularly to this because I have adolescent and pediatric populations in my home, and we are all grieving the loss of my mom. My kids were very close to my mom. So this is something that was important to me to learn about. And this was a nice review. The author is Pamela Mosher. And again, I put the link in our newsletter. If you're not a part of our newsletter, if you're a person with a neurologic disorder, go to reactivept.com. If you're a healthcare provider, go to reactiveeducation.com. Join our newsletter. I'm sharing all these resources. So what I love is that in this article, in the pediatric adolescent population, she talks through a lot of the symptoms that frankly, I think a lot of us experience, and my kids experience: fatigue, difficulty with concentration, focus, attention, and memory, speaking rarely or frequently about the person who's lost, insomnia or hypersomnia, increased or decreased appetite, nausea, abdominal discomfort, diarrhea, GI upsets, headache, pain, drop attacks happening, regression in behavior, so maybe bowel and bladder problems, thumb sucking, separation anxiety, maybe even anger and aggressive outbursts, nightmares, withdrawal from people, restlessness, also things like behaving as if everything is totally fine. So all of these things are possible uh, behaviors, including body-based behaviors. And what was really interesting in this review article is that they actually found that sometimes this profound grief can actually lead to a functional neurologic disorder, particularly in a person who has avoided the grief. And I thought this was really, really interesting, particularly my own reactions and typical ways to maybe avoid things. This is something I've had a lot of therapy for, so I'm not sitting in that now, but certainly did as a kid, would avoid really strong emotions. So it really made me think what we think about in functional neurologic disorders, not by any means that they're all related to grief, but it is something that I've seen, and I've seen it in kids as well, is that some of their symptoms may have come on after a very big and emotional event. Maybe that was part of the cascade of triggers for a functional neurologic disorder, and maybe avoiding grief is part of it. Really, really interesting thing to think about. So that's some of what can happen in the body. Then I really wanted to know a little bit, of course, of what's happening in the brain. So looking at this history, there's this great article called Grief, A Brief History of Research on How Body, Mind, and Brain Adapt. Mary Frances O'Connor is the author. Again, I will put the link in our newsletter. Sign up for our newsletter, really great resources. And they did know that several brain regions seem to be implicated. So brain regions of emotional processing, of course, mentalizing, episodic memory retrieval, processing of faces, visual imagery, autonomic regulation, no surprise there, right? And modulation or coordination of all of these functions. So again, our connectivity changes with our emotions, including grief. And what they found is there are some patterns, though these are not always the same, but increased activation in the default network and the salience network. And that those are key pieces too that are a part of many other disorders. One of the things, again, that they found, and they talk about this in the review, is that those people who seem to be more avoidant of those strong emotional aspect of grief is that they will tend to have a continuous application of the attentional network. And this may actually lead to some of the brain fog that can be experienced. So I also found that very, very interesting. So it's really no wonder that some of the same symptoms that we see with chronic dizziness or post-concussion maybe very similar to the things that we might experience in our brain and body with grief, brain fog, the autonomic symptoms, the concentration, the reading difficulty, and so on. Um, so of course, so that was the second article. I wanted to share one more, which was really interesting because this theme of avoiding behaviors, which I think is so common, especially in younger people, um, they want to help people, not be avoidant, but how do you do that, right? So there was one article, it was called Adolescent Bereavement, Embodied Responses, Coping, and Perceptions of a Body Awareness Support Program. So this is where they actually had a support bereavement group for this group of people. And it was about becoming in tune with how they feel this in their body. This is definitely, I have a bias here because this has definitely been a lot of the work that I've personally done. And obviously, I'm very interested in this connection between the brain, mind, and body. But I've done this in my own my own therapy practice, meaning I work with a therapist who helps me understand how I feel my emotions in my body. So, a couple of lines from this article. It says most researchers have concluded that physical reactions such as bodily pain, lack of energy, sleep disorders, increased sensitivity, these are very commonly experienced by people experiencing grief. So we're not alone in this. It's so helpful to know that you're not alone. Um, and many of those symptoms are also very similar to an acute traumatic stress reaction, which really is what grief is as well. Um, so they talk then through how they incorporate an understanding of the body symptoms for adolescents. So the program included talking about becoming aware of experiencing your own body sensations, awareness of this, like through writing and reflecting around things like if my body could talk, it would tell me. And that is like literally what was in here, what sparked a lot of my interest in this. Um, they also looked at what situations might evoke some of those body responses and what's helpful. They worked through awareness and mindfulness and breathing and different techniques that could influence the body sensation. And then talked about how to incorporate that into everyday life. Um, and here's something that they shared in the study. They said the bodily dimensions of grief can be powerful and debilitating. And the adolescents in our study often tried in vain to block out these reactions by avoidance. Recognizing this phenomenon may help health professionals to better support adolescents in coping with these reactions. Health professionals can help by understanding adolescents' attempts to provide a facade of normality and by offering them support to deal with their grief, which may be harder for them than they wish to indicate. Oh, that really, really spoke to my heart because this really brings me back to my own experience. Prior to kind of going through my own therapy process over the last 7 years or so, I was a natural avoider and blocker of things. It was second nature to me. And it really took, quite honestly, and it's still taking a lot of therapy to actually experience emotion like I am now and live in it. And that's where I'm at. I can't do it alone. I got a book. I got several books to help me in this process. The journal has really been very helpful. I have my one-on-one therapy. I have my family that's okay and encourages me to openly grieve. I have colleagues and friends and a community are like you that are encouraging me to stay present with it and experience it. And here I am, just doing that. And I would really encourage you to think about that for yourself, and for your clients. And gosh, I just really want to say thank you. Thanks for being a part of this community. Um, Thanks for letting me share something personal that has led to a lot of interest in research as well. Um, and again, I'll share this video and all the resources that I talked about in the newsletter this week. So please, if you're a person with a neurologic disorder, join that newsletter at reactivept.com. It's going to come out Monday. If you're a healthcare provider, join our education newsletter at reactiveeducation.com. And that comes out today. So thank you again from the bottom of my heart. I so appreciate you, and have a wonderful weekend.